So welcome everyone. Today's topic is clarity of mind. So how many of you knew what the topic was before you came? Oh, okay. Well, let's start with, I think this will be sort of a traditional structure where we take some time to deeply think about and reflect on our concepts of clarity of mind. And then along the way, we'll explore what Buddhist thought presents. In particular, in this teaching, some of the quotes that my teacher, Domo Geshe Rinpoche, gave, as well as influences by Nischala Joy Devi and Mingyur Rinpoche and a couple others as well in this teaching. So what I'd like to do is just invite us to sit for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. So just find a place to sit comfortably, maybe with the back erect. And I love how Mingyur Rinpoche describes this. He says, if you sit in 7-point posture, a very formal meditation posture, and remember all the points, he calls it formal. And if you just sit comfortably with your back erect, he calls it informal meditation posture. So whichever is more comfortable for you. And I just want to ask, what is clarity of mind? Or let's go at it this way. First of all, why are we here? Why do we want to know about clarity of mind? And what questions come up about clarity of mind? Okay, so just think for a moment. What is the question that you have about clarity of mind? So as you're ready, you can open your eyes, become a little more aware of the room. What would you like to know about clarity of mind?
One thought that occurs to me is what does it have to do with control of our mind?
Okay.
And also how do we sustain clarity of mind rather than constantly struggle for it and lose it, gain it for an instant, and then lose it most of the time and gain it for an instant again.
Okay. That's a good question. So how do we keep that baseline? Great. Thank you.
And what is the antidote for muddled mind?
Okay. What is the antidote for muddled mind? Okay. Thank you.
How do I keep my mind in the present moment and not worry about what ifs, what's going on, all the questions that you get bombarded by every day, and how to keep your mind. I think a clarity of mind is being in the here and now.
Okay.
But how do you keep it in the here and now?
Okay. So if we phrase that in a question, how would I keep my mind in the here and now in order to be clear? Or how would I stop myself from being bombarded by all the thoughts? And when you say bombarded by all the thoughts, where are the thoughts coming from?
Inner critic.
Okay. So my own thoughts.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
What is the quickest way to clear your mind?
What is the quickest way to clear your mind? Okay. Yeah. Let's get it done. Efficiently.
Efficiently.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions? Do you have one, Sarah? Or are you just thinking?
Well, I know that like grasping at clarity of mind is not going to be the way to keep clarity of mind.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we keep it in a way that's not grasping?
How do we keep clarity of mind in a way that doesn't involve grasping?
Struggling.
Struggling. Okay. Struggling. Okay. What do you mean by struggling?
Does that face?
Okay. So she made a very, for those of you who might be watching this later, she made a very strong facial feature to indicate what she meant by struggling. So I think we'll get into that a little bit more. So, okay. So a lot of times we understand what something is by what it's not. So let's start with what it's not. What isn't clarity? Or what is the lack of clarity?
Stress.
Stress. Why is stress the lack of clarity?
Stress arouses emotions and negative responses and gets you scattered and distracted, and you lose the ability to think and act clearly.
Okay, great. And that's actually shown physiologically. If you have a lot of anxiety or stress, you can't think as clearly. Great, thank you. What else? What isn't clarity of mind?
Confusion.
Confusion. Yeah. Confusion. You want to say a little more about that?
Well, I guess confusion is, it's related to, I guess, uncertainty about what to worry about, what to think about, kind of what you were talking about, what to focus on,
Okay.
whether you're doing the right things, thinking about the right things.
Okay. So it's unclear what the important things are. It's unclear what the where you need to focus.
That's part of it, yeah. Or, well, yeah, that's probably narrower than confusion. It's unclear where you need to focus, but it's also, it can be unclear about anything. Unclear
Okay.
about your place in the world,
Okay.
unclear about your relationship to others, unclear about what you should be doing with your time.
So maybe unclear about many things.
Yeah.
Confusion might be unclear about many things
Yeah,
too.
depending on
Okay.
where the individual is at the moment. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. What else?
Mine was confusion as well, but it shows up for me as doubt, and often self-doubt. Am I doing it right? Am I discerning well? Am I judging? Am I, the self-doubt comes up.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm going to have to say the presence of uncontrolled emotions.
Okay. The presence of uncontrolled emotions. Do you want to say a little more about that?
When I'm holding strong emotions, whether it's anger or sadness or those things are prevalent, and you really can't see through that sometimes if you're really hanging on to them. That's it.
What about uncontrolled joy? Or uncontrolled happiness?
Yeah, I think that could, I think there was a lot of uncontrolled happiness or excitement or joy last weekend or whenever there was this big basketball game in Madison, and people lost sight of their purpose for a while, as far as, I'm here to go to school, I'm here to, or I'm here to, whatever it is that their focus is, they lost sight of it for a while because of this big hoopla about basketball games.
Okay. So the thing that I'd like to pull out in what you said is you said the word excitement. And we talked about this.
This is true.
We've talked about this in, I think, the loving kindness series. Did we talk about excitement and loving kindness? I think. So there's a difference between excitement and enthusiasm. And excitement has a quality of disrupting the mind. Whereas we use enthusiasm as the term that doesn't disrupt the mind in the same way that excitement does. So I'm curious if it was the excitement that disrupted the minds, or if it was the happiness and joy that disrupted the mind. Because I might, as we get into this, we might feel that joy and happiness may actually support clarity of mind sometimes, whereas other emotions that you're mentioning, which we often call afflictive emotion or dysfunctional emotion, those emotions that don't actually work for your highest goals, are the ones that create disorganization in the mind. So let's explore that as we go along and see what we find. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Spaciness is not clarity of mind.
Spaciness is not clarity of mind. So can you describe that a little more?
There's sort of a dullness there.
Okay, so it has a dull quality to it, as
Yeah.
opposed to...
Clarity of mind is bright and yeah, not dull.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. What isn't clarity of mind?
I have two more. I guess they might be outgrowths of unclear mind: worry and fear.
Okay, worry and fear. Good. So this is a little bit related to, you said uncontrolled emotion, right? And worry and fear. And then I propose that maybe it's afflictive emotion, and worry and fear would be two of the afflictive emotions. So things that disrupt the clarity of mind. Okay. Any others before we move on?
I'm thinking.
Do you have one?
I think sometimes the excitement and the joy, I'm going to echo a little bit what you had said. Some of the excitement and joy, at least in my life, is to mask the unclarity of my mind.
Okay.
That I'm going to be happy, happy, happy. It's easier to go to joyful and happiness and excitement because then it might help the disclarity of the mind. It will help shut it down a little bit. And then I'll reopen it up when I have the energy and no anxiety and no stress to deal with it.
So it sounds like you're saying, would you be saying that that there's something about joy that helps create clarity? Are you saying?
Yes.
And enthusiasm or excitement that helps create clarity of mind?
I'm saying that sometimes people use it to mask what's really going on in the mind, which may be doubt and self-critic, inner critic, whatever. And I think people use that facade or whatever on the outside because the inside is crazy. It's crazy.
So would you be saying that clarity of mind isn't just masking your lack of clarity with strategies that overlay it but don't actually change it?
Yeah.
Good. Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Say that again.
So I think what Sarah is talking about is that, and the thing that, the example that I have of this is actually we talk about cultivating joy, and this came from a teaching in Cultivating Joy, where you can't just overlay joy on a joyless state, right? you actually have to get rid of the joyless state first. You can't put patience over top of impatience and have patience. You actually, impatience sits in the place where patience would sit, like musical chairs. The chair is already taken by impatience, or the chair is already taken by joylessness or fear. And so that dynamic actually has to leave or dissolve or disappear or exit the chair in this case in order for patience to sit down or in order for joy to sit down. And I think what you're also saying is that you can't just use some of the random techniques when you lack clarity of mind. You can't just pretend, you just can't get yourself more and more excited in order to gain clarity of mind. That it might feel like you're a little bit clearer, but there are some strategies, and I'm not sure if I agree or disagree with all of the strategies that you listed, but there are some strategies that don't actually clear the mind. But they are used in our society to clear the mind. Or to appear as if we have clarity of mind when we don't.
Appear, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right, because we have to go to work or because we have to accomplish something, right? Or if we didn't appear that we had clarity of mind, maybe it wouldn't be good for our working relationships or things like that. So we have lots of stories about why we need to appear that we have clarity of mind when we actually don't. Okay.
That's very important point.
Oh. So what do you do when you lack clarity of mind? Not the antidote, but how do you behave or what do you experience when you lack clarity of mind?
Scatteredness.
Scattered. Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking of the child's story, the tortoise and the hare.
Mm-hmm.
The tortoise had clarity and focus, and the hare ran all over the place, distracted.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of focusing on the race.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sometimes there's an analogy about the monkey mind, right? Like a monkey running around the house, looking out all the windows to see if there's anything new or interesting out the windows. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had similar. It was like this wasted energy, that I use up all kinds of energy.
Okay.
That's not productive.
So you feel tired.
Yeah.
And
exhausted.
and that your energy is wasted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Great. What else?
What comes to mind for me is when you do have clarity of mind and you look back on it, you have regret for how you did not have clarity of mind and how you behaved or what you did.
So you don't like so you're saying when you do have clarity of mind, you don't like or you regret the actions that you take when you lack clarity of mind.
Correct.
Yeah. What else?
But they're also learning, that you also learn from them.
Yeah.
Hopefully learn from them.
Yeah, and so you learn from them, and I think that that's a good point. That in our society we view failure as very problematic, but if you actually study what happens when people fail, is that they actually learn. And not only do they learn, but they learn much better than other study strategies. So there's actually some research out today, and this is a little bit of a divergence, but I'll bring it back. There's some research out today that basically gave students an opportunity to study for 3 study periods before they took a test. And then another group of students, they just gave the test 3 times. Okay? So they gave the test, there's a little period of time, then they they discussed it, another test and another test, right? And the kids who just basically were given the test without studying and then failed failed at answering some of the questions or many of the questions, and then took the test and test again, they were more likely, they learned more, and they were more likely to remember it about 40% longer than the other students. So there's research that says if we learn by failing, that we actually understand it better and we retain it longer, right? So in our culture, even though we think that failure is bad, and we have all these subtle messages, right? So, you can go and to a new job and be trained in the job, and there's some period of time where you're expected to make mistakes, and then suddenly you're not expected to not make mistakes. But we cannot control everything in this world. It's rather exhausting to try to control everything. And so there will be times when we make mistakes, right? But there's sort of this unspoken or spoken expectation that at some point you won't be making any more mistakes at work, right? And so it's deeply in our culture, this assumption that we're not going to fail, we shouldn't fail, and our job is to ensure that if in fact there was a failure, that it's never seen. It's never seen by the client if you're an account manager or if you work in customer service, But in Buddhist thought, in Buddhism, we understand that there's this learning process that goes on. And there's space for learning, and there's space for making an attempt and actually failing and learning from that. And so that's one of the things that as we go through and we think about things, we think about, okay, why do we want clarity of mind? Why are we here? What is the lack of clarity? We're all speaking from experience, right? Because we've tried to achieve clarity of mind and we haven't always accomplished it, right? But in thinking about those times when we've actually failed, then we can gain some insight, not only from that, but from other things, but we can gain some insight. When we think about our own experiences and our own crossed wires, then those wires come apart and we gain more clarity on a particular subject. But we have to think deeply about that sometimes, which is why we started today with a little bit of quiet and meditation and reflection so that we could think more deeply about where we're headed. So thank you for saying that. Mm-hmm. So back to the question, what do you do when you lack clarity of mind? Or what happens when you lack clarity of mind?
I make bad decisions.
Make bad decisions.
Or don't make a decision, which is in itself a decision.
Yeah.
And then from there get to exactly what you said, which is regret later, but I make bad decisions.
Yeah.
Or don't decide.
Yeah, or I feel stuck.
Right.
Personally, I feel stuck, like I can't,
right.
There's too much conflicting information and I can't actually make a choice about which direction to go. And you said, and a lack of decision then is a decision because some things, if you let that go on, some things just naturally fall off the table, right?
Something's going to happen as a result of your lack of decision.
Yeah. Yeah, or you make bad decisions. Mm-hmm. Or let's say, bad is such a tricky word. We could say decisions that don't produce the result that you would like, or, yeah. So, anything else before we move on? Overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. How about stressed? Stress produces lack of clarity in the mind, and then lack of clarity in the mind produces stress. Right, so we have a circular cycle that goes on.
Under stress, also, we get frustrated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, frustrated. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was going to say that it feeds more negative emotions.
Mm-hmm.
That as the more unclear I am, it just kind of circulates this.
Yeah.
Negative energy.
So there's a kind of snowball effect that happens, that it just kind of keeps adding and adding. One feeds the other. Lack of clarity feeds afflictive emotion. Afflictive emotion feeds lack of clarity. So we just kind of keep rolling and keep rolling here until it kind of builds. Right? What about, I feel kind of klutzy sometimes. I'm klutzy for a couple reasons, but one of them is lack of clarity, I think. Because I don't focus as clearly. There are other reasons why I don't focus, but...
To kind of echo what Lynn was just saying, specifically, I think as humans, we look for ways to numb out. If things are unclear, if your head is stuck, if you can't find, if you don't want to deal with it, just let it be, then you go look for things being, let's go shopping, it will help it.
Yeah.
Go shopping, it will help the numbness, or it will just make it even more numb.
Yeah.
But you'll get a high, you'll get a little high off of it. Go get a new outfit, get new makeup, get whatever pleases you, a new car, whatever. And it's gonna make it great. Then all of a sudden it goes away.
Yeah.
And then you're back to unclarity. And your mind isn't clear. And it's going 1,000 miles an hour.
So we numb it.
We numb
And
out.
we numb it through, and we numb it through measures that make it feel temporarily like we have clarity of mind. So there could be two things here, right? It could be just a complete numbing, right? But there also could be these things like, I don't know, bungee jumping, where suddenly you feel more clear, right?
Yeah.
Like, wow, right? I feel totally alive. And there is actually an alive kind of feeling that we get when we feel more clear. So, I have a quote for you. If we talk about a non-meditator, there is a moving toward wanting to feel alive. Okay? So when you're seeking, when you're a spiritual seeker or a seeker, there's a wanting to feel more alive in your life, more rich, more vibrant. You know you must stop doing something that you're doing in order to exchange it for a certain kind of clarity. Right? There is some kind of cloud that you want to break through, and you want to experience some kind of clarity which is associated with feeling alive. Right? So this feeling of life has to be connected with a kind of alertness and clarity. So it's kind of interesting because one of the things that we see is we numb out because we lack clarity of mind, and that's disturbing us. But we also seek this, the other thing that we do is we seek to feel enlivened in order to gain more clarity. And it's a temporary measure a lot of times because one of the things that we can do is thrill seeking in order to do that. Roller coasters, extreme sports. And how much do we see of that these days? It's really on the rise. And from the perspective of the teachings, that's about wanting to feel more alive, wanting to feel clearer and more vibrant in your own being, right? So those two are connected, very strongly connected. Okay, so we know what it's not. So what is clarity of mind?
Feeling fulfilled.
Feeling fulfilled. What do you mean by that?
Feeling like you, when I am done with a meditation, or I've just gotten off retreat, or or I've listened to a teaching, or any of those kind of elements, and afterwards I feel like I'm not in need of anything else at the moment, that I feel like I have focus again.
Okay, so there's a certain kind of satisfaction that allows you to be less distracted by things that you could be craving? Would it be things that you could be craving?
Yeah, things that I don't really, are not that important.
Okay, and then you can focus.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
When I have clarity of mind, I feel like I have a clearer vision of my true path,
Okay.
my purpose, what what I really need to do.
So-
Not that I have to do everything and not that I have to control everything, but what really is the most meaningful thing to me.
So an aspect of having clarity of mind is that you feel that you are more in tune with the things that are truly important to you.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. What is clarity of mind?
It's a grounding and centeredness that will generate a proactive state rather than a reactive state.
Okay, a grounding and centeredness that will create a proactive state rather than a reactive state. So can you tell me a little bit about the proactive state?
Well, it can go from like being able to sit in meditation and being able to generate that focus and intention anywhere to functioning in ordinary life. And as stresses and stimuli are coming at you, you are able to handle them in a constructive way rather than a reactionary way.
Okay, yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you. So, Taikshin once shared this analogy with me, and I thought it was so helpful to understand clarity of mind. And so I have to attribute this to her wisdom. But she said, mind is like water. And we wanted to bring you a little special visual cue, but when it got to Joyful Path, we lost it. But we brought you, but we had intended to bring a jar of water from Milwaukee, from Lake Michigan.
It was really gross water.
But if you could just imagine a jar of water from Milwaukee, right? And a jar of water from the tap in Milwaukee, which is also from Lake Michigan, right? So one of those waters you'd probably want to drink, and one of them you probably wouldn't want to drink, right? Well, the nature of mind itself is clarity, right? You cannot separate clarity from mind. Just like the nature of water is clarity. So what's in the jar of water that comes out of the tap? Compared to what's in the jar of water that comes out of the lake directly. What's in the jar that comes out of the lake?
Particulates.
Particulates. Yeah. What kinds of particulates?
Plant matter.
Plants.
Animal matter.
Animal matter, dirt. Chemicals. All kinds of stuff, right? And it gives it a cloudy, unclear appearance, right? And actually, if we do it just right, oftentimes there's like grit in the bottom. So there's like, it's not clear, it's totally cloudy, and it's often got like little wavy looking particulate, like maybe some scum, pond scum in it, right, floating around. And if we do it really well, then there's some like dirt and sand at the bottom of it, right? So not really appealing to drink, right? But is that the water? No, because if it was the water itself, you couldn't remove it from the water, right? But you can remove it from the water. And when you remove it from the water, what happens?
It's clear.
It's clear, right? And the water is something that you might want to drink, right? Now, we could go into fine detail because the water that comes from the tap still has a few things in it, right? And so we could even take it farther. right? And we could say most people will drink water out of the tap if we need to, right? But some of us would prefer not to drink the chemicals that are still left in the water after we remove the particulate, right? And the things that we can see, then some of us would prefer that, and we remove some of the things that we can't see, right? We have some sort of minimum standard, right? And so that we can debate this, but I'm just talking in general. We have some minimum standard for what comes out of the tap and what we drink, right? Drinkable water. And then what we would all, I think, really prefer is if there were no contaminants in our water, right? That we didn't have to worry about anything. But there's some that's acceptable, right? So are these gradients of water that have contaminant in them. And it's just like the mind. So you don't actually have to make your mind clear. Because your mind is already clear. It's already clarity. You simply have to remove the contaminants in the mind. You have to remove the obstacles to that clarity. So I think it's really an amazing concept that we have. And not only is the nature of mind clarity, but there's also a light component to it. You were talking about it's not foggy, it's light, or maybe luminescent. There's a kind of light that's associated with the mind. So we have this clear, luminous mind, and then we have these contaminants combined with it. So how did that happen? How does that happen?
Social and parental programming.
Social and parental programming. We could go underneath that, though. Go farther underneath that. Where does that come from?
Karma.
Karma, right. So part of this is that well, I'll just step back. So karma, we can describe karma by saying it's causes and conditions. So causes are like a seed, and conditions are like the water, whether it's scummy or not, and the dirt and the sun and things like that, right? And if we don't understand exactly how things work in this world, if there's some discrepancy between the way that things really work and the way that we think that they work, then we unintentionally plant seeds for whatever, right? And so if you strongly adhere to Buddhist philosophy, then then you're someone who might think that you've been doing this for lifetimes. But even if you were doing it in this lifetime, right, unintentionally planting seeds, and we can see that. We can all think of examples where we tried to do something nice at work and it just didn't come off the way we wanted it to come off. But if we understood how that situation worked exactly, we should be able to produce the desired result, right? But we didn't entirely understand. So we're creating these causes and conditions, right? Parents are creating these causes and conditions. We're having interactions, right, in which we're beginning to see the fruition of these causes and conditions that we're building up over time. Okay. So karma is a mechanism by which this happens. But what else? What else is involved?
A grasping or a wanting, a desiring something. That's as far as I got.
So a kind of, tell me a little bit more about grasping. Do you have something you can add to that? Or give me an example.
Ask the question again and then I'll...
Okay. So how does our mind get combined? If it's clarity itself and we have unclear minds, how does it get combined with the contaminants? Or the things that cloud our mind? What happens?
Grasping at seeing, having a perception of, in a particular way that doesn't, I'm not sure.
You want to think about it?
Yes.
Okay. Marilyn?
Half-formed thought, in terms of the contaminants analogy, how do the contaminants get in the mind or in the water? We let them in.
Okay, we let them in.
Or we even invite them in.
We invite them in.
So
Okay.
we're not being mindful about the contaminants.
Okay.
Where, for some reason, there's no filtering, we're not filtering.
We're not filtering. We let them in. Okay, so give me an example of how we do that in a real world application.
In a real world application,
Yeah.
we would, for example, allow ourselves to worry about something that hasn't happened yet or that already happened and we can't do anything about.
Okay, and the contaminant is?
The contaminant is the afflictive emotion of
The
worry.
afflictive emotion of worry. Okay, so we're allowing or permitting, maybe intentionally or unintentionally, afflictive emotion to create some kind of clouding of our mind.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
I wanted to elaborate on what Denima was bringing up on the grasping, the attachments to distortions or perceptions or stories,
Okay, yeah.
traumas from the past that don't necessarily apply to the present.
Okay, so you're grabbing on to trauma, perception,
a
a delusion.
and it's not
Yeah.
necessarily present in the present moment.
Okay.
So it distorts what's happening currently
Okay.
and perpetuates that karma.
So you're grabbing onto a contaminant, basically.
Right.
Yeah, and hanging on to it. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Sometimes other people, it's more specifically, you can go into work someday and you have someone that contaminates you go in, you're happy, 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 and then you get into an environment of colleagues that you work with that might be sour or not having a good day, and you get pulled right into it very, very
Okay.
easily, depending on your energy, your
Okay.
energy level. If you're tired, it's very easy to go in that direction and it's
Mhm.
contaminated.
Mm-hmm.
Other days you can walk into work, you can block it
Mm-hmm.
and have a very clear mind the whole day. So
Okay.
sometimes you're influenced by others, very easily, that can happen.
Okay. So, so let's see. I want to repeat it back to you.
Mhm.
So, there's an environmental, usually often produced by others, but an environmental negativity or an environmental afflictive or contaminant, often brought on by other people's emotions, and some days you're more susceptible to that than others. What days are you more susceptible to it?
I find if I'm tired,
If you're tired.
I'll get sucked right into it real
Okay.
quick. And
Or-
then other days that I'm not tired, like I said, it's very, very easy not to have them persuade you how to feel. The energy of the building, the energy of the students that I work with.
Yeah.
It's very interesting how the mind so quickly, depending on your energy level, can change that whole shift.
Would you
So-
say you feel more clear on the days when you feel more resilient?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Steve?
I wanted to use something from loving kindness. When we feel or allow others to make us feel inconvenienced,
Yeah, when we feel inconvenienced. Right?
that fogs the mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And we talked in loving kindness about there's an element of impatience.
It brings up
There's an element of judgment and feeling an inconvenience. And it's not being inconvenienced because we're all inconvenienced by others, but it's actually just feeling inconvenienced where there's a level of, as I said, impatience and a level of judgment about the value of my time versus your time, and things like that.
one more. Sticking with the analogy of the contaminants in the lake, what I'm thinking what also causes that is losing sight of the big picture. So for example, in a lake situation, we dump something in that we shouldn't because it's convenient in the short term, or we remove something from the ecology that needs to be there because it serves some need, immediate need, and we're not thinking about the long-term picture. The same with the mind. We let things in sometimes because we're not thinking about the big picture or the long term. We're thinking about something that's very temporal and dealing with that.
Yeah. So when we don't have the most important values and goals in mind, then we can be distracted by little things that actually take away from what we would actually like to accomplish.
Right.
And in our case, it's clarity of mind and probably happiness and feeling alive and those kinds of things. It's things that we typically all share. Maytak, do you want to add something? You've been quiet.
I was thinking about ignorance
Okay.
and how maybe it bonds, the clear mind bonds with contaminants because it's ignorant that it's clear in the first place, or that its true nature is clear.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't know the clarity.
Yeah. Or we could also maybe say that we don't understand exactly what the contaminants are or how that works. And so it's just there because we don't understand how it works. Right?
But we don't know how to remove them.
Or we don't know how to remove them. So that is a great segue into the next section. So how do we gain clarity of mind? I have three things. So the first one is stop adding to the problem. Right? So, and we talked about how do we add to the problem. So let's go back to an example just so we have a clear example. I'm thinking of the one that you gave about the afflictive emotion produces lack of clarity, fogs the mind, produces the afflictive emotion, and in that cycle, right? So a quote from Rinpoche, from the teaching How to Be Happy. To work toward the valuable goal of reducing anger produces a sense of satisfaction and accomplishment. To the extent that anger is reduced, the darkness of the agenda is lightened. This is a valuable goal. To the extent that you reduce your anger, even a little bit, you gain a sense of lightness, and happiness begins to look at you again. The darkness of obstacles clumps energy together, like gathering a dirty snowball, and clouds you. That is why the delusions are called obscurations, because they obscure the lightness of your natural being. The unhappy mind has a darkness to it, a sickly darkness. To reduce the obscuration of anger begins to clear twisted energy held like a tight fist inside. As it clears, the clarity of natural mind begins to shine. This is not yet enlightened mind. This is a correct human mind and its energy life. The natural state of mind, that mind, is happiness. As the darkness begins to lighten, the mental states associated with the stress caused by that density also dissipates, and we feel encouraged. By feeling better, we want to reduce the dysfunction even more. At a certain level of clarity, by reducing clenched energy, we see that old strategies were not as good as we thought. Actually, we already knew that anger was not as good as a strategy as we thought. So there's some things in here. So she's using a couple of new analogies, right? She's using the term obscuration, right, as something that obscures the light and clarity of your mind. And she's talking about clenched energies, right? So tell me a little bit about how you think clenched energies fit into this.
Can you define clenched energy?
Well, let me ask the group. What's clenched energy?
An entrenchment and being inured to the suffering of your daily life. Also possibly trauma, the way it manifests in your psyche or even your body.
Okay, good. So clenched energies are tightening in your energetic body, but it could also be reflected in your physical body. It often is, right? So give me an example of when of a situation in which we tend to clench or tighten.
When you're afraid.
When you're afraid.
A lot of people tighten just from the word no.
No.
Because they heard it so many times as a kid when they were about to get into trouble.
Yeah.
Okay.
How, in your kids,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
When you say-
There's a student in our room, you say no, and he's like, "Wah!" He just freaks out. But just the word itself.
Right.
Okay,
Or they
that
go,
makes sense.
you say no, and they go,
Yeah.
Right? And that's, you can see them tense, right?
That's clenched energy?
Yeah.
Okay.
To me, clenched energy, I just keep thinking of the sand analogy, and that you really want something so bad that you grab it and you just keep holding on to it so tightly, but you want it so bad that it just kind of seeps out. It's like holding sand and trying to grab hold of it tighter and tighter, and by the time you're done grasping, it's all gone.
That's good.
So there are different ways of clenching. One of them could be old causes and conditions coming together to actually create clenched energies at a very, very subtle level. And there's all kinds of ways we can explore that, but there's definitely not time today. There's clenched energies like a reactionary, like an instinctive habit of clenching the energies when you react. And then there's just good old-fashioned stubbornness, intentional or unintentional. And Rinpoche will often say that she'll use an analogy where it's a kid with a hand in the candy jar, and they get a big handful of candy, and they can't get the hand out of the jar. So they just hang on and hang on and hang on, and the hand becomes really hot and sweaty, and the candy all melts and sticks together into this disgusting, gooey mass, right? But there's that insistence of like hanging on, and there are times when we do that too. So different ways in which we can kind of clamp down. So, but when we work with afflictive emotion, when we begin to remove some of the things that obscure the clarity of our own mind, right, we begin to relax. But we can also do it the other way. We can say, when we're seeking clarity of mind, when we're in situations and we lack clarity, we can relax, right? Relax our energies. So there's strategies that we can use. So the three about stop adding to the problem: relax, be mindful, and don't take things so seriously. See them in their context, right? So humor would be good here too, right? Having a sense of humor. And also, I would also add to this, just being willing to give up the things that are standing in the way of clarity of mind. Just a willingness. And I have a quote from Chemistry of Change. Rinpoche says, "When I first started to teach, people said, how do I become enlightened? And we said, fewer perceptions and higher quality. There are many perceptions you now possess that you don't need. They just annoy you." So even just being willing to change your perceptions is being willing to do that. Okay. Number 2, soothe turbulent waters and the contaminants settle down. Soothe turbulent waters and the contaminants settle down. What am I talking about in this analogy?
I'm not stirring them up all the time.
Mm-hmm. So if we think about a lake, what happens when the waters become calm?
So it settles to the bottom.
Yeah, a lot of it settles to the bottom, right? Or goes to the top where it can be skimmed off, right? And Pema Chodron said, when she first started meditating, her mind got really, really clear. And then she could see the bottom of the lake. And all the boots and rusted cars and everything that was on the bottom that had fallen into the lake over the years. I don't know what the exact quote was, but so there are some benefits and some drawbacks to soothing the turbulent waters and allowing the contaminants to settle down. So what are the benefits?
You become more productive.
Yeah, you have more focus, you have a little more clarity, right? More clarity.
More energy.
More peace of mind.
Maybe more peace of mind. Yeah. And then what's the drawback?
The stuff is still in there.
The stuff is still there. And because it's still there, what's the challenge?
Getting them out. You have to stay really calm, otherwise the water's muddy again.
You have to stay really calm or otherwise the water's muddy again. Right? So there's a kind of calm that we can bring to the situation. There's a kind of clarity that we can gain, right? But the contaminants are sort of still there in various ways, right? So, so we have to be really careful not to get the mind going again, not to get too involved in afflictive.
Isn't one of the challenges of that also not only that the contaminants are still there, but now we have an awareness of them? A more awareness of them, I mean, we can see them more clearly.
Okay, so we could just spend our whole time looking at our
them.
dysfunctional
Right.
whatever sitting on the bottom, sort of contemplating our navel rather than enjoying the amount of clarity that we have, right? So
Right.
we could actually get totally distracted and distressed because now we can actually see what's there. And that's actually a mistake that beginning meditators make is they begin to meditate and they feel like the chatter in the mind goes way up. Or that they can't concentrate when they could concentrate more before. But actually they're just becoming aware of what's actually happening in their own minds. It's not a sign that things are going poorly. And actually Mingyur Rinpoche calls that the waterfall effect, where things are just like, thoughts are just gushing at you. And his analogy is that actually over time it becomes more like a river and then more like a lake, that it actually, eventually we begin to experience a level of calmness and clarity. But it first starts like just gushing at us. But it was always there. It wasn't, just because it feels more intense or like there's more chatter, it's not that it wasn't there.
Right. Well, and when we experience the gushing, our first instinct could be, I need to get away from this. I need to stop this gushing.
Yeah.
So rather than follow it through the process to those next phases, you back out and say, no, I can't handle it.
We clench.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Right?
Exactly.
And then what happens? It gets stuck,
Yeah.
right? Because when you clench down on something, it can't flow through anymore. Okay. So how do we soothe turbulent waters? There are some techniques, mind-calming techniques, right? Breath meditations. There are breathing techniques, pranayama techniques. And actually, I like one from Nischala Joy Devi. We don't do a lot of this here at Joyful. Well, we do this, but we don't call it imagery. But she says, imagery, our inner guidance, allows us to create and experience. It is the language of the mind. The mind speaks in images and then translates those images into words. When we listen to words or concepts, we interpret them in ways we are familiar with or that we can understand. We practice positive imagery as a means to allow the mind and body to mobilize all available resources that assist in the healing process. Creating an intention that brings about positive physiological and psychological responses, such as lowering blood pressure, boosting immune function, clarity of mind, calming of brain waves, decreased heart rate, and producing a feeling of well-being. Through positive mental imagery, signals are sent to the body to help it repair and sustain energy. When asking a group of people if they do imagery, usually about 1/3 will raise their hands. When I ask for how many worry, there is laughter and all the hands fly into the air. How many of us realize that we are constantly doing imagery? Worry and anxiety are examples of very powerful negative imagery that can cause great problems. When we worry, we are imagining something that could happen. Many of us do this type of imagery all too frequently and all too well. Sometimes the results come just as we imagined, or mostly they don't happen at all. So stop worrying was the first point. And the second point is understand that you can utilize the way that the mind works in order to create positive results as well as negative results, right? So, and the body, so we can use the breath, the way that the body already works through breathing or through imagery of different kinds. Okay? I had hoped to practice in this category, but I think I'm going to move on because we only have about 10 minutes left, and I want to get to the third category, which I think is really important. So you'll notice that these are all things that we talk about in Joyful Path in different areas, right? So we have different classes that kind of talk about understanding how things work, like practical Buddhist wisdom, and how to stop some of the behaviors that are actually contributing to negative experiences that you're having. And then we have certain classes. Right now we don't teach a breath meditation class or a pranayama class, but we do teach loving kindness. And we have other classes where we really focus on how to calm the mind, right? And then the third option here, we also have classes on, and this is where we really specialize. And the third one is, what do you think? It's
Distilling the water into clear.
remove the contaminants. Right? Now, I want to tell you something. I didn't say this earlier. But how do we get contaminants in the mind? Because it's a byproduct of thinking. So a byproduct of having a human body is that there are physical contaminants that are removed from the body. Having a mind means that there's a certain amount of what Rinpoche calls energetic detritus, a certain amount of contaminant that's just produced by thinking. That's it. Right? And so it's important to actually take time to remove the contaminants on a consistent basis. And Rinpoche will say you'll take a shower every day to clean the body. Why wouldn't you also clean the mind? Right? So how long have you gone without a shower for the mind? How long have you gone without actually intentionally cleaning your mind? So we may have some buildup from not thinking about these strategies to clean the mind. So basic meditations will help clean the mind and remove the contaminants from the mind. But the best ones, or the most profound and effective ones that I feel are out there, are actually purification practices. Practices designed specifically to remove the contaminants in the mind. And I want to talk about two in particular because I want to offer a process that's used in our tradition to repair mistakes. And it also helps purify the mind. And the reason is because you can think about it from the perspective of any tradition. And then the second one I want to talk about is transformational meditations. And we use that term as a technical term here at Joyful Path and in our tradition to refer to the Vajrayana meditations that have as their object compassion or wisdom and tend to include a sadhana. And those are things that you can find out more information here. And we actually do green light meditation one Friday a month here, and you can come. And we also do those meditations in the morning here, Monday through Friday, in the early morning. So there are chances to explore and experience those. But the one that the practice I want to talk about is called the practice of the four opponent powers, or the four powers. And Mingyur Rinpoche says, within this practice, there are four approaches to purification. And each one was generated by the particular circumstances of four of the Buddha's disciples. So these were taught from the Buddha to his disciples. And they're called the power of support, the power of remorse, the power of antidote, and the power of resolve. And they're called a little bit different translations here and there, listed in different orders here and there. But I just want to talk a little bit about them. So the power of support. And I want to talk about this in terms of making a mistake, because I think it makes it really clear. But you can use this, you can just use this generally to clear the mind. So you could say, I'm sure I've made mistakes in the past. I'm sure that the product of not understanding how things work has created some contamination in my mind and some obstacles in my mind. And for the benefit of myself and others, I would really like to clear my mind of those things. So you don't have to say, well, I made this mistake today, and I made that mistake today, and I made this mistake today, and I want to purify from, and get rid of the contaminants that arose from those mistakes, or getting involved in afflictive emotions, or, whatever the situation, becoming involved in a stress story. You don't have to come up with a list of ways in which you have fogged your own mind or created obstacles in your own mind or obscurations in your mind. You can just say, I'm sure they're there. I'm sure they're there. And not only are they there, but I'm pretty sure that if I would have really known and been skillful at this, I could have just avoided it to begin with. So it must be something that's pretty difficult for me. And what do you want when you're trying to do something that's really difficult? What do people often want? When you're trying to do something that's difficult, very hard for you, maybe kind of scary, or something that you've never done before, what do you do?
Look for a hand to hold.
Yeah, you look for support, right? You go talk to a friend, or, you get some kind of support in order to help you through it, right? And so this is the power of support. Except the power of support doesn't come just from a friend. Because we all know that friends, they love you and they care for you, but they can't always be there in the way that you need them to be there. And so in our tradition, the power of support is from a greater power than yourself or your friends. And if you want to listen to the teaching on refuge, Chini talks, that's out on our YouTube channel, Chini talks about we take refuge in our parents, we take refuge in our friends, we even take refuge in guns to feel safe and to feel like we have the strength to do what we need to do. And then at some point we become disappointed because they don't actually work. They're not actually working in the way that we want them to. And so the power of support is greater power, is feeling that you have safety and protection in a higher power or a deeper spiritual process, whichever you want. You don't have to believe in God, right? But that you have some connection to a deeper spiritual process where you're developing feelings of safety and confidence in that path. Okay? So if you don't have this in your life today, there are ways to cultivate it. Because in our society, we feel harmed, right? We feel harmed by religion sometimes, or a lack of trust, because we've experienced ordinary challenges. But there is a way to create this feeling of trust and safety in deeper spiritual process. And if that's something that you're interested in, you can talk with us about that, and we can talk more about that. So this is epitomized in our tradition by the Buddha of purification. That makes sense, right? In this process, in this particular process. But we could also say the Buddha, right? Or perhaps God, if you're Christian, right? Okay, so that's the power of support. I'm not sure I can do this on my own, or I feel some trepidation, or I need to learn something, and I want to feel like I have support. Okay? The second one is the power of remorse. And we talk about this in loving kindness and in some of our other classes, but this is not the power of guilt. It is not the power of shame. It's the power of remorse or regret. So some people feel like regret is for small infractions and remorse is for larger infractions. But whichever of those words resonate with you. And the reason is that we use the words remorse or regret is that we did something that we really don't want to do, and we kind of wish that we could change or improve, right? But guilt actually has an element of self-punishment in it. And that ties up energy that could be free for other things. Now, there are many different definitions of guilt, depending upon, what you're reading or studying. But in our tradition, guilt does have that element of self-punishment. Not repair, punishment. Okay? So, in the Buddhist tradition, we say refuge, our refuge formula, which invokes our feelings of support, and then we feel a sense of remorse. And then the power of the antidote. And there's a quote that I'm just going to take a quick look. Mingyur Rinpoche says, we use the term antidote here to mean the opposite of negativity, in the same way that water is the antidote to fire, or the way that light dispels darkness. Here, we use imagination and mantra as the antidote for negativity. So in our Buddhist tradition, we have specific ways that we do that, right? So he's saying we use imagination and mantra. So we're getting back to the imagery that Nischala Joy Devi was talking about before, that we actually use the mind to visualize virtuous images or virtuous states of mind. And that's something that we do through transformational meditation again. Vajrasattva, the Buddha of purification, one of the things that we would do is visualize the Buddha of purification, and then we would say mantra, which is an empowered prayer that is specifically for purification. Okay? So in other traditions, you might say prayer. There might be other kinds of antidotes that you use. There could be, you could actually apologize if you made a mistake. That could be part of this process, although it's not the part that you do on your cushion. These things can all, when we're talking about using imagination and mantra as the antidote for negativity, these things can be done on your cushion. They can be reparations that you do whether or not you can actually communicate with someone, and whether or not you've actually know what your infraction may have been or not. So again, we can go back to, I lack clarity of mind. I must have, through ignorance or some other process, clouded my own mind, allowed the clouding of my own mind, or maybe, whatever, as you examples earlier. So there must have been some way in which unintentionally my mind has become clouded, because I don't think most of us cloud our minds intentionally. And I would like for that to be cleared. And so this is a nice antidote. So in your own tradition, you can actually, with this information, you can identify the things within your own tradition that are designed to do that. Because in all of the great spiritual traditions, there's something that's designed to do that. Or you can learn more, if you don't already know, you can learn more about the Buddhist tradition should you wish to do those kinds of practices. And the last one I forget how he says it here because we say it different. power of resolve, which I also just called determination. So the last part of this is to be determined that you're not going to do something again. So I imagine or invoke or sense my connection in which I feel safe in the presence of deeper spiritual process. I regret or have remorse that this something has happened in my own mind. I apply an antidote, and then I just determine that I'm not going to do it again. And this is a purification practice, right, that anyone can do. This is built into the meditation practices that we do here. It's built into the green light practice. It's built into the purification practices that we do here. It's built into the healing practices, meditations that we do here. So it is a part of, in some form or fashion, is a part of all the practices that we do, that we call transformational practices. There may be one that's not like that, but I find that it's very powerful. And then it settles. It does have the effect of settling and calming, bringing clarity, and it sustains itself over time. So that when you, like you were talking earlier, when you are in those situations, sometimes you feel more susceptible and sometimes you don't. If there's nothing to stir up in you, if there's no cloudiness to stir up in you, it's much more difficult to be affected by those situations, right? And so we develop more resiliency because there's just simply nothing to churn up. And that may take time and practice. But even if we stop contributing, even if we just bring a little bit of clarity to mind, even if we just do a small amount of purification, most people report that they're feeling results. So thank you all. Any errors are my own, and any benefits are due to the kindness of my teachers. Thank you. May my capacity for compassion be infinite. I dedicate these efforts to complete and total enlightenment so that I may be of benefit to all sentient beings. May it be so.